begin the meeting. Good evening, everybody. My name is David Kozis. Welcome to our meeting for Traffic Council for September 12th. I'm just going to begin quickly with introductions. I'm David Kozis. I'm the Transportation Coordinator from the Department of Public Works. I see we have the other voting members of Traffic Council tonight. Captain Devine from the Traffic Bureau, Isaac Prezant, our traffic engineer from DPW, and we have Margot Schoenfelder. She's our citizen representative. I do not see any counselors with us yet. Danielle, do you have?
Correct. No.
Okay, so we might be joined by Councilor Downs or Councilor Greenberg. Oh, I see that we are now joined by Councilor Greenberg from Ward 1. And we also have Danielle Delaney, our committee clerk, and I also see Jeannie Fairley, our ADA coordinator. So we'll just begin with our first item of the evening. Our first item is AP 524. It's Lori Collis, 15 Crystal Street, requesting an accessible parking space in front of 15 Crystal Street. So we'll just begin with a quick presentation, and then I'll open it up to the petitioner or anyone from the public who would like to comment. So this is the location of 15 Crystal Street, the red rectangle. Here's a photo of 15 Crystal Street. We see the front of the house, the walkway into the house. And we have the regulations listed, the parking regulations listed for Crystal Street. There are no regulations on the west side. There's no parking prohibitions on the west side. I know that this item has already gone through the Newton Commission on Disability to add an accessible space in front of 15 Crystal Street. They did vote 5-0 to support that petition. And our recommendation tonight is also to approve that space. We have the language in front of us to be able to vote tonight to approve that space. And that's the presentation we have for this item. At this point, I would open the floor to anyone from the public who might wish to comment on this item. If you do, if you could unmute yourself or wave and I don't see anybody who wishes to speak on this item yet. Jeannie?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. A little delay here for some odd reason. Yeah, I just wanted to let the Traffic Council know that, and you probably did get my email about that the Commission on Disability did listen to Lori's petition on behalf of her daughter and for accessible parking space out front of her house, because her driveway is very narrow and it really doesn't allow for even at this moment her a vehicle from a program to even let their lift or ramp out to help her daughter into their van. They have to stop out front because the street is parked up quite a bit and like all the time, and they are actually the van sitting in the travel lane basically on their little street until her daughter can enter and of course exit as well. So it's a very it's a very needed space out front of Mrs. Collis's house for especially helping her daughter who uses a wheelchair to get around. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it
Jeannie
was passed unanimously by the Commission on Disability. Thank you.
Yes, we did get that email.
Okay, good.
Thank you. And I see that we are joined by Councilor Downs from Ward 5, who will also be voting as a voting member of Traffic Council. So any other comments from the public? We're still on the first item and we are recommending approval of the accessible parking space at 15 Crystal Street. If anyone else wishes to speak before we vote, if you could raise your hand. I don't see anyone. So I will go ahead and make
David, there was some discussion at the commission about, or the council about, I think was it this space where they have plenty of space, but their daughter has twins? Do I recall the discussion right?
Jeannie said no. Right, and I wasn't at that meeting.
I looked at the recording. Okay, thanks.
This is, so
Jeannie?
this is Mr. Roberts, and he's number AP 4-24. So this one we're talking right now started off with AP 5-24.
Right,
Mrs. Collison for her daughter, who uses a wheelchair. Different street, different people.
okay, one street over. So we'll
Yeah.
get that to that one soon. Okay, so I don't see anyone else raising their hand wishing to speak, so I would like to go ahead and make the motion. We have the language in front of us. It would be TPR 946, right, Danielle? That's where
Yes,
we are?
yes, correct.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to approve the language of TPR 946 to approve the accessible space. And we would need to wait 20 days to make sure that there's no appeal. After 20 days, we're at the beginning of October, so sometime after October 2nd, if there's no appeals, then the new sign would be posted in front of 15 Crystal Street, 155 feet south of Beacon Street. Any last comments before Danielle calls the roll?
I will abstain since I missed the discussion.
Okay. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Miss Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's 4-0, and Counselor Downs, you're abstaining?
That's correct.
Okay, 4-0, Counselor Downs abstaining.
Okay, thank you. So again, after October 2nd, if there's no appeal, then the space will be marked with a new sign and pole. Our next item of the evening is AP 624. This is Walter Stewart of 25 Lincoln Road, requesting an accessible parking space in front of 25 Lincoln Road. So this is in Nonantum. This is where the location is on Lincoln Road. Here's an aerial view showing where the space would be in front of the house at 25 Lincoln Road. This item also went to the Commission on Disability. This was actually back in July at their July 17th meeting, also passed unanimously. We do have the email from Jeannie. So we are recommending approval of the space here as well. And are there any comments for this item? Jeannie?
Don't like to correct you, David, but this particular one for Mr. Stewart was actually presented at the most recent Commission on Disability on September 9th.
Okay.
The third one is the one that was in
Oh,
July.
you're right. I looked at the date that the item was docketed, not the date that it was heard.
Yeah, so it was just
September 9th.
this past Monday night. Yes, thank you. And I believe Walter's here if anyone has any questions, but yes, they did pass it unanimously. Thank you, the Commission on Disability.
Thank you. And I see Councilor Greenberg, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Kosis. I just, as a Ward 1 counselor, I just want to speak in support of this accessible parking space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. Any other comments on this item? I'd like to make a motion to approve AP 624. This would be TPR 947. And Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Miss Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 947.
Thank you. And just like the last item, we would just need to wait until after October 2nd to make sure there's no appeals before the sign is posted. Then we are moving on to AP 424, John Roberts, 21 Newberry Street, requesting an accessible parking space in front of 21 Newberry Street. So here is the location of 21 Newberry Street in the red rectangle. Here's a view of a photo of the house and the driveway. So in this case, parking is prohibited on the west side and on the south side of Newberry Street between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So because you cannot park there for part of the year at all, we cannot approve the accessible space on that side of the street. So our recommendation is to approve the space, but on the east side of the street, so across the street from 21 Newberry Street. So that would be on the east side. So that is our recommendation for approval, but on the east side where parking is allowed all year. This item was heard by the Commission on Disability. This was at the July 8th meeting and approved 6-1 to 1. So again, our recommendation is to approve the space, but on the east side of Newberry Street, across from 21 Newberry Street. And we could open it up now to any discussion or comment. Lucy Chansky. And you would just need to unmute.
Yes.
Okay, I see you unmuted.
Okay.
Hi, Lucy.
I had trouble unmuting, sorry. Yes, is it my understanding that parking is prohibited on the west side just part of the year?
Parking
that
is
correct?
prohibited on the west side and the south side between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Okay, so I did send a suggestion that there be a switch when parking is allowed on the side that Mr. Roberts lives, that parking, his accessible space be in front of his house. And that it's then allowed that the neighbors who live on the east side could then park in front of their house. And I look at the signs that have dates on them for BC parking, and I'm wondering why the same thing can't happen, so that both neighbors can be accommodated and feel comfortable being able. Mr. Roberts could get more easily to his car on his side of the street, and the neighbors across the street have the use of the front of their house. And I just think that would be a very good solution, and I would hope that it might be possible to do that.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Any members of Traffic Council? Councilor Downs.
Hi, I'm wondering if Jeannie can summarize the discussion and why it came to 611.
Jeannie, are you still here? Yes.
Now I am. Yes, I'm here. Yes, thank you, Councilor Downs. Yes, there was quite a bit of discussion. There was one objection, and that was Lucy's suggestion that that either by signage or switching signs, but maybe just by signage, that because I think Mr. Roberts would benefit more from the parking space actually in front of his house those 9 months, and the 3 months knowing there's no parking, that would be just understood by the sign that there's no parking, not even in the accessible space during those 3 months of the summer. However, switching signs and back and forth, most of the members just thought that they supported both back and forth, but for the most part, knowing that there's no parking, even part of the time, that it would probably be more, possible to even get an accessible space, to get it for at least the whole year on the other side of the street. So opposite Mr. Roberts' home. So that was the majority, 6 members. One was abstaining because they came in late to the discussion, and one was and then one objection, and hoping that some compromise could be worked out, but that wasn't the final motion from the Commission on Disability. But Lucy has stated it quite well, that perhaps by a time frame, the sign could say no parking and then parking. So it's up to the traffic council, and the commission members knew that, and so did Mr. Roberts.
Right.
Thank you.
And- Yeah, may I speak again? It's Lucy.
Yes, Lucy.
Yes, the council did not vote for my suggestion because they said, oh, they'll never approve that. And I feel like it doesn't hurt to us because it certainly would be helpful to those two families.
So if I remember right, and Chair Kozis, you can correct me, I hope if I'm wrong. This came before us because for the seasonal prohibition because of parking for the lake. People who want to go use the lake and they park on the street in the summer. And the prohibition was made on the west side of the street because I'm looking at it in Google Maps. That's where the telephone poles are. And so I don't have to put in additional concrete bases and to put up signs on the west side. We would have to do that on the east side.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm also looking at this on Google Maps, and the neighbor across the street, there are two neighbors directly across the street from Mr. Roberts. One of them has a double wide driveway that would fit easily 2 cars, perhaps 3, and so doesn't really need to have in front door parking. The other faces onto Newbury Terrace, which is the dead end off of Newbury Street. So, and it's a very low traffic street. So my inclination would be not to change it. Again, my understanding, and Ms. Fairley, maybe you can correct me on this. And I can see they have a narrow driveway that can fit 2, maybe 3 cars, but you'd have to move one out in order to move the last one in. Or you'd have to, whoever parked last would have to leave or move their car before somebody behind them could get out. But my understanding is that the reason they would like this spot is so that their one of their offspring who has twins can use the driveway when they visit, and that is not what the council normally approves. Is that correct?
That was never stated at the meeting, but that I remember.
Jeannie, do you have a
Can
comment?
Yeah. So yes, that was one reason, but actually both Mr. Roberts and I believe his wife also has a disability placard, and it is so parked up that it's almost impossible because they do have more of a tandem driveway that it's impossible even to park near the house, even across the street. So that is why the commission members went for at least the parking space that would stay all year round. Granted, the parking would be okay in front of his house. So it is a combination of the street being totally parked up in the summer, but sometimes more than that. And then also that they don't, walking any distance, parking their car further down. That was just an aside about the grandchildren. So when I didn't even know that until the meeting. So and Mr. Roberts is here if he wants to speak. But it was definitely for accessibility. It was not for convenience.
Right. Understood then. Well, that's what I wanted to clarify. And I can understand that, as we have 80-degree days in September, there will be people driving to use the lake and parking on Newbury Street. And that is one reason it is parked up. And that is also one reason we prohibited parking on the one side, is that the neighbors were worried about emergency access during the summer. So that satisfies me. I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. And I do see, John, that you have your hand up. I would just say, I appreciate the idea of having a accessible space part of the time on one side of the street. I mean, first of all, I don't think it's realistic for our DPW crew to install a sign and then take it down and put it on the other side and then put it back on the one side again every year. That's never going to happen. That's not realistic. And so if we don't do that, we would be saying that there would be a potential to have parking on both sides of the street at one time, which was the whole reason that we put in the parking regulation in the first place. So I think it would be helpful to add the accessible space on the opposite side of the street for the very reason that we heard that sometimes the street is all parked up. And at least that if we have a accessible space available, it would, I guess it would most of the time be available and helpful to this family. So I would continue to recommend approving the space on the opposite side of the street all year round. And John, go ahead and unmute yourself, please. So you're Mr. Roberts, right? You can't unmute?
All right.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I was having some trouble with both the video and audio. Yes, I think, having the space across the street would do just fine. And I agree with you. I think it's unrealistic to expect it to flip-flop back and forth depending on the season. I did want to clarify something else, though. Our oldest daughter lives with us with her two 4-year-old daughters because her husband suddenly died this time last year. So they've had to move in with us, which is the whole reason we're a more crowded household, and certainly I would like to be. I would also like to reinforce, yes, my wife has a handicap placard. I have a chronic neurological condition that's not expected to improve and probably will deteriorate. So I also have a handicap placard. So I'm hoping that you can feel okay about granting this request.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. With that, are there any other comments?
Yes, it's Lucy again. I guess I don't see the need to switch signs physically. I think there can be dates on the sign, on both signs, indicating when you can and when you cannot park on each side. And that's the last thing I have to say.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for those comments. Any other comments from the public? Okay. With that, I would like to make a motion that we have available in front of us. The recommendation would be, or the motion would be, to approve the accessible space on the east side across from 21 Newberry Street. This would be TPR 948. We do have a 20-day appeal period. If anyone feels very, very strongly opposed to this motion, they could file an appeal. And then if that is the case, this item would be held sort of frozen, and then the decision would be made by the full city council. If this motion is approved and nobody appeals it, then we just need to wait until after October 2nd for the signs to be installed. So the motion is to approve the item TPR 948 for AP 424. Any last comments before we call the roll? Okay. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Ms. Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 948.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Jeannie. And we're going to move on to the next item, which is TC 3524. Councilor Greenberg requesting a stop sign at the end of Emerson Street southbound where it intersects with Pearl Street. Note that this petition does not request a stop sign on Pearl Street. Okay, so here we are on Emerson at Pearl Street in Newton Corner. Here's a view looking south toward Pearl Street. This is Emerson. You see the T intersection right here. There's no stop sign. We do get this type of request for stop signs at T intersections regularly, almost every meeting. And so we have the same slide at every meeting that when we get this type of request, we're not required to approve a stop sign. There's actually no official warrants that we need to follow. It's not necessary to install a stop sign, but of course it's allowed. Typically, almost every time that this comes before us, we look at the pedestrian access, we look where the schools are. We do tend to believe that there's a small safety benefit to adding a stop sign at locations like this, especially where we have school children crossing to get to school. And it also clarifies the right of way. You need to come to a stop at the end of Emerson before you turn onto Pearl Street. So we are recommending to approve the stop sign at this location, and we have the language to allow us to vote for that at this meeting. So Councilor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Kosas. I really appreciate your analysis and I wholly support the stop sign there. This is a safe route to schools, and I understand that there was a tragic accident recently there in that area. So I think a stop sign would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. Any other comments? Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to approve this stop sign. This would be TPR 949 for TC 3524. And I don't see any other comments, so could you please call the roll, Danielle?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Divine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Ms. Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 949.
Okay. And again, we would need to wait until October 2nd, make sure there's no appeals. Then we need to do the dig safe, make sure that we could safely install it. Maybe we don't need to do dig safe at this location. Let me take another look if there's a pole there. Oh, okay, we might not need to do dig safe, just put the stop sign on the utility pole. But in any event, we will wait at least until October 2nd. And then with no appeal, the stop sign should be installed shortly thereafter. And we're going to move to the next item. Okay. So our next item is TC 3624. This is Suzanne Sanctor, 11 Phillips Lane, and Ann Walker, 20 Phillips Lane, requesting a change to the parking regulations on Phillips Lane, including the addition of Phillips Lane into the Newtonville Neighborhood Parking District. Note that Phillips Lane is a private way, but all properties abutting Phillips Lane are included in this request. All right, so here is a map of one of our parking districts. This is our largest parking district. This is in Newtonville. And you see here, the red circle is where Phillips Lane is. You can see that Phillips Lane is listed on the map. It's not part of the parking district yet, which means that if you live on Phillips Lane, you do not get to have a permit to be able to park longer than the posted regulations. So the request is to add Phillips Lane into the Newtonville Neighborhood Parking District. This is sort of this is what, if you look at our transportation page, you would see the map of the parking district and then some notes about the map. So these are the notes. We create these notes really primarily, or one of the main reasons is to send out to Newton North High School. This map and all these notes are sent out every year to the parents and to the students, indicating where they should be parking and where they should not be parking in the neighborhood. And I just put the notes in here to show that Phillips Lane is right now specifically listed as being a private way that is not included in the parking district. The request is to add it into the district. So here is a photo of Phillips Lane. It is very narrow. It's only 10 to 12 feet wide. Definitely not wide enough to allow parking on the streets. Right, here's another view of it. Actually, parking is allowed in our traffic and parking regulations. Parking is actually allowed except for between 8 AM and 6 PM. That's the official regulations. That's the posted sign that we see there now. I don't know that people would really park there because if someone parks there, you can't get by. So one thing that we would need to do is change that regulation so that you cannot park on such a narrow street. Again, it's a private way. Because it's a private way, the residents of the street are in charge of deciding what the regulations are. They do have the ability to come to traffic council to ask for official signage and city enforcement. If every single resident on the street signs the petition and agrees, which is the case, this is exactly what happened. We did get the request from every resident on the street. So what would happen is that if traffic council votes to add Phillips Lane into the parking district, into the Newtonville neighborhood parking district, and that if there's no parking allowed on Phillips Lane, the residents of Phillips Lane would be able to get a permit to park on a nearby street, right? They wouldn't get a permit that says that you could park on Phillips Lane, but they could come to the traffic council and get a permit and two visitor passes that say either Phillips or Pulsifer Street or Clyde Street, and be able to park there when they need to park. That would be beyond the posted limits, the posted restrictions. So Pulsifer Street, you can see on the map, and Clyde Street, if you would need to have a permit to park there anytime between 8 AM and 4 PM on school days. So if it's approved, again, I hope it's clear now that the residents who live on Phillips Lane would be able to get a permit, a sticker to put on their car. It's $25 a year for a calendar year, or visitor passes, up to 2 free visitor passes that they could choose would be either for Pulsifer Street or Clyde Street, and would be able to park there during school hours between 8 AM and 4 PM when otherwise it's restricted. Okay. So that is the request. That is our recommendation. So we are recommending to approve the docketed item, to prohibit parking officially on Phillips Lane, and to add it into the Newtonville neighborhood parking district. And this is the technical language that we would be voting on to update our official city traffic and parking regulations in the way shown on this slide. And we would also need to wait our 20-day appeals period. So that is the presentation. I'll open it up now to a public comment. Any questions anyone might have? And I see Suzanne Sanker, you have raised your hand. And if you could just let us know your address, please. Oh, I think it might be on here, right? So it's 11 Phillips Lane, right?
Right, I'm at 11 Phillips Lane, and I just wanted to say the residents of Phillips Lane would really appreciate the approval of the council. The situation that we're in now is that if we're not able to accommodate a visitor or, let's say, a workman's truck in our driveways, then we have to park on Pulsifer. And if it's during school hours, that means that people are ticketed, and that does on occasion happen. And so we're really trying to change that situation so that we could be able to park on Pulsifer or Clyde. Because, like, as you said, even though there are parking signs on Phillips Lane, there's no parking on Phillips Lane. So,
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did get 2 letters of support that came to Traffic Council. One came from the residents at 20 Pulsifer Street, and then another came from all 3 Ward 2 councilors. Both letters supported the approval of the item. Marissa Fusco. if you could just unmute, and then we just need to know your address for the record.
Hi, thank you. Had a little trouble unmuting. So I am actually at 27 Pulsifer Street, which is directly across from Phillips Lane. I appreciate the residents of Phillips Lane making this request, but I think we are in a unique situation where our property we do not have a driveway. So we have a right of way on our neighbor's driveway, which gives us access to a garage that's in the back of our property. Also, Pulsifer Street is restricted parking on the east side, and so the parking is limited to the west side. Parking in our garage and bringing groceries in and so forth is probably about 100 or so feet at minimum, and it does cause a hardship. So I would request or ask for some consideration, if there is, of those residents on Phillips Lane, as they have guest placards or whatnot, to ask that their guests not necessarily park right in front of Pulsifer Street, 27 Pulsifer Street. I note that many of our neighbors on Phillips Lane, and I appreciate it, on weekends and not during those school hours, are very considerate and tend to not necessarily park right in front of our house. So that I do appreciate. But I am concerned that, providing play cards and having people sort of park there long term is just going to cause us an undue burden. Unfair, I should say, burden.
Thank you for that comment. And, I would add that the residents of Phillips Lane it's not required that they select Pulsifer Street for their permits. Maybe perhaps some of them could pick Clyde Street instead, or, it's really a public way though. And just like the residents of Pulsifer Street are eligible to get permits to park on Pulsifer Street, I think we would be giving equal access to the Phillips Lane residents who are also taxpayers of the city. I see Ann Walker. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm at 20 Phillips Lane. And I would just like to say that it is very rare that people on Phillips Lane need to park on Pulsifer. That has occurred to me certainly when we had work done recently, when I was having a sidewalk put in and I got a parking ticket. But, our workers needed obviously to be in our driveway. And I have spoken to other neighbors who have also gotten parking tickets, but it's only in the rare instances that we're having a guest or we're having work done on the house. So this is not very frequent. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the main thing is the whole reason for having created the Newtonville Neighborhood Parking District in the first place was so that we don't have hundreds and hundreds of students driving to school and parking on neighborhood streets. It's really primarily limited to the residents who live on these streets, especially the ones who live on streets that are shown in purple or in yellow on this map. It's totally restricted to during school hours on these public roads, only to the residents who live on the streets or the abutting street. And I do believe that every house on Phillips Lane has a driveway. I only went down there once or twice, but I think they all do have driveways, which would be more convenient on a day-to-day basis, right, for parking. Suzanne Sanker?
I just wanted to say, yes, you're right. All the residents on Phillips Lane have driveways. And I think just to sort of underscore what Ann said, people typically park in their driveways if they can. So it's an unusual situation that would occur during Newton North school hours, where we would need to have parking on Pulsifer if there were, if there were workmen at the house or if you had daytime guests. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Marissa Fusco. And if you could unmute.
I'm normally used to Teams, so Zoom was a little bit different. Just one additional request. Is it possible to sort of split the permit request to either Pulsifer or Clyde, or is that not a possibility?
Well,
Just
it's
again,
not-
it
It's
doesn't.
really not a possibility because of the way that the language has been written in the ordinance. I think I have it here. It says, that's sort of the red font at the bottom. Residents who live on a street that is included in the district but are less than 20 feet wide, or if there's no parking available, could choose another street. So it doesn't say they must choose like a certain number on one street and a certain number on. It's really up to the residents who live there to choose what is the most convenient for them. Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarification, if I may. There's no parking allowed on Cabot, correct? It's also very narrow.
Right. It's very limited parking or no parking, I think, at some times, and it's very narrow, and I don't think we would want to encourage parking on
Right.
Cabot Street, and it's not in the parking district.
Right, and this is also, it's not in the parking district, we could make it part of it though.
Yeah.
And it would be convenient for some on Pulsifer Street, it's just too narrow for parking and we don't allow it. So it would be Pulsifer, Clyde for the people on Phillips Lane. I've been down there, I know the neighborhood well, I park on Pulsifer in the evenings when I go to visit friends on Pulsifer, and in the evenings, it's not so much of a problem. Definitely during school hours, I could see that being rather tight. But these are public roads and I would support this. Thank you.
Thank you. My guess is that they probably see the most cars on Pulsifer Street during school pickup, during the school year, more than any other time anyway. And they're just sort of waiting there for their students to come and be picked up. So would anyone like to make a motion? We do have this language available for us to vote on.
Sure, I'll make the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilor Downs to approve the language of TPR 950 to remove the parking restriction or to create a new parking restriction on Phillips Lane, which would be no parking anytime on both sides, and to add Phillips Lane into the parking district. We would need to wait until after October 2nd. If anyone strongly believes that this is should be appealed, they do have the right to file an appeal before October 2nd, in which case this item would be frozen and Public Safety and Transportation Committee of City Council would take it up and vote at that time. Otherwise, if there's no appeal, I think that all that would need to happen would be to wait until October 2nd. And on that date, the sign should be changed out on Phillips Lane so that it would say no parking anytime both sides. And that would be the indication that the residents would be able to go to the Traffic Bureau in West Newton to request receive their parking stickers. It's $25 per sticker for the calendar year. So, I don't know if anyone would want to wait until January. In January, you'd have to buy another sticker for the next calendar year, for calendar year 2025. But after October 2nd, at least you can get your 2 free visitor placards, which are transferable placards. If your guests come, you can give them the placard to park on a nearby street. Is that all clear? I think so. So we do have a motion on the table made by Councilor Downs. Any last comments? Okay. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Ms. Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 950.
And thank you. Thank you all. And we're going to move on to our last two items of the evening. We have TC 924, which is Sue Klein, 12 Russell Road, Newton Corner, requesting a discussion and a possible change to the parking regulations on Russell Road. This item was heard back on April 11th and held. I'm also going to open the last item, which is TC 2424. Transportation Engineer Adrian Ayala, Director of Transportation Operations Ned Codd, Traffic Council Chair David Kozis, Traffic Engineer Isaac Prezant, Councilor Downs, Councilor Greenberg, and Councilor Leary, requesting a discussion and possible action to change the official parking regulations on Nonantum Place, the section of Charles Bank Road between St. James Street and Center Street, and potentially Jefferson Street, Russell Road, and Maple Street. This discussion is likely to include whether to remove or modify the current parking meter zones on Charles Bank Road, and whether to modify the resident-only permit zones on Nonantum Place and Charles Bank Road in some way, with a goal of improving consistency and on-street parking availability to residents of Russell Road, Charles Bank Terrace, Orchard Street, Jefferson Street, and other streets in the immediate neighborhood. All right, so I'm going to go through this presentation first, and then looking forward to a conversation. So the first item is TC 924. So this item, again, we heard back on April 11th at Traffic Council. I'm going to go through this presentation again quickly. This is Russell Road in Newton Corner. It's a dead-end street off Charles Bank. Here's a view. This is looking down Russell Road toward the river, toward the dead end. Here's another view of Russell Road. You see a lot of cars parked on Russell Road. Here's a view of Russell Road looking looking southbound up the hill to Charles Bank. So we had a long discussion back at the April 11th Traffic Council meeting. And in the end, we decided that it would be better if we expand this discussion to include nearby streets. So we sort of held this item and then docketed the next item, which I'm going to go through this presentation, and then we'll open it up for public comment. So this is the 2424, TC 2424. And this is the area of Newton Corner that we're talking about. I'm calling it the Charles Bank Road vicinity. So back after we discussed Russell Road and held that item, I did some data collection, which is presented here. You could see for each street, we have a column: Jefferson Street, Maple Street, Nonantum Place, Charles Bank Road, Russell Road, Orchard Street, and then Charles Bank Terrace. And I list the parking regulations on each of these streets. They're all different. Jefferson Street, you can only park on Jefferson Street for 1 hour, most of the time. On Maple Street, parking is prohibited on one side, but it's unrestricted on the other side. And then you have Nonantum Place and Charles Bank Road, where you need to have a permit almost all the time. On Charles Bank Road, you need a permit, a resident permit, all the time to be able to park on Charles Bank Road. Only the residents of these streets are eligible to get the permits to park on these two streets. And then you have Russell Road that has no restrictions on either side. Anyone can park there at any time. And then you have Orchard Street, which you can't park on either side. The residents of Orchard Street have no opportunity to park on their street or the nearby streets. And then Charles Bank Terrace, same thing, no ability to park on the street. So after I wrote down the parking restrictions on the streets, I tried to calculate about how many parking spaces there are on each street. So that's this row. On Jefferson Street, about 14 vehicles would be able to park on Jefferson Street, but again, only for 1 hour. Maple Street, 10 vehicles. They could park all day. Nonantum Place, there's about 13 spaces on Nonantum Place, only for residents who live on the street. Charles Bank Road has a lot of parking availability. There's about 30 spaces, but they're all reserved only for residents who live on Charles Bank Road. Russell Road has about 8 spaces, about 8 legal spaces on Russell Road. And then Orchard Street and Charles Bank Road, there's no parking spaces. So then I went several times in May to count the occupancy, how many cars were parked on each of these streets. And that's sort of shown here and then summarized at the bottom. And you could see Russell Road heavily parked up. 83% of the spaces were occupied. It's really overutilized because there's no restriction. Anyone can park there all day. But then you look at Nonantum Place and Charles Bank Road, underutilized. Only about 25% of the spaces at the times that I went were occupied. So we have one street that's underutilized, 2 streets that are, one street is overutilized, a lot of people parking there, 2 other streets underutilized, and then you have Jefferson Street, which is only 20% of the, of all the spaces were parked up. And that's because, it's hard to use because you can only park there for 1 hour. So we have all different things going on in a small neighborhood, and we thought it would be better to have a discussion about maybe something else that seems more fair and equitable, right? In addition, we do have 8 parking meters on Charles Bank Road, sort of at the end of Charles Bank Road. We have 8 long-term meters that are probably just about the least well-utilized meters we have anywhere in the city, very, very lightly used. The times that I went by, either none of the meters were in use or maybe one, a low occupancy rate. Maybe better to reuse some or all of those spaces in some other way. So this is really docketed as a discussion, and we want to hear from the public about, I'm going to present actually 3 different options, and then I want to see if we can have a discussion and some reaction. So option 1, before we present option 1, I just created this map that shows all the different parking regulations in this small neighborhood, right? So what you see in red are areas where you can't park. There's no parking, like on Orchard Street and on, one side of many of these streets. Then we have Jefferson Street. This area shown in pink, that's the 1 hour limit from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., including Saturdays, right? Then we have in orange, this is Charles Bank, this whole area with resident only parking at all times, every day of the week. And then on Nonantum Place in blue, the 2 different areas that are resident only, except Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. And then Maple Street up here, where I think they're building a new house right there, and there's a few houses here on Maple Street. There's no restriction in the area shown in green, and then of course on Russell Road, officially, there's no restriction on either side. And then we have the parking meter zone shown in yellow. We have 6 meters at the end of Charles Bank Road, and then an area of no parking, and then 2 meters. So I wanted to just show the existing parking regulations and then an option that we could talk about. So I'm trying to, let me see. Can we see the difference, right? The areas of Charles Bank Road and Nonantum Road, you could see change from orange and blue to purple, right? Those are the only changes. the change would be, and I envision this as a trial to see how it goes, to remove the existing signs on these two streets and replace it with a sign that says resident permit only, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So, what would that mean? It would, first of all, be easy to implement as a trial because we're not putting new poles in the ground. We're not, all we're doing is changing the signs on the poles. The residents who live on these streets would keep their resident permits. It would open up these spaces more to other residents after 11 a.m., right? Or before 9 a.m., but also continue to protect these streets from commuters who might want to park there all day and take the express bus into Boston, or from employees who might work in the area they can't because they would not be able to park there between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Also, this would remove 6 of the meters that we have at the end of Charles Bank Road and reuse this space to sort of extend the resident parking zone. It would improve parking conditions for Russell Road, I think, because there's more opportunities now that not everybody needs to jam their cars onto Russell Road. After 11 o'clock, some of these cars would be able to move to Charles Bank Road, for instance. So that is option 1. Again, I sort of view this as a trial that we could approve, change the signs, see what happens, and invite the neighborhood to a future traffic council meeting to hear about what happened at that, during the trial, and, how we might best proceed. So option 2 out of 3 is very, very similar to option 1, right? Again, option 1 would be making a change to these 2 streets. So it would be resident permit parking only, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I picked this particular idea as an option because this is exactly what we did on another street in Newton called Judith Road not too long ago that used to be resident only. And we made a change to make it resident only from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. That was because it's near Walnut Street and the residents of Walnut Street had nowhere to park after we put a bike lane in. So that seems like it worked out very well. And so that's why I thought maybe we could do the same kind of trial here in this neighborhood. So option 2 is similar, except instead of having the sign say resident permit only 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., it would say 2-hour limit, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that would mean that the residents who live on other streets in the neighborhood would be able to park in this area for 2 hours. But the residents who live on these streets would still be able to park all day, overriding the parking restriction with their resident permit. So just, gives a little bit more flexibility to residents who maybe live on Orchard Road and, also taxpayers who have nowhere to be able to park their car at all, ever. At least they would be able to go and, park on another nearby street for a couple hours. So this is similar to option 1. I think it would be a little bit harder for the police because with option 1, the police enforcement would, be able to go to the street and see if there's a car that's parked there between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. And if there is, then they would be, able to issue a ticket. In this case, with option 2, they would have to come back again 2 hours later to see if that car is still parked there, right? But, sometimes people like having a 2-hour limit instead of a restriction during a specified time. Then we have option 3, which is different than the other options. It's the idea of creating, we just watched the last item. You saw one of our neighborhoods in Newton that has a neighborhood parking district. We have several of these across the city. Newtonville, which we just saw, was one. So, we might want to think about just creating a parking district in this whole neighborhood, right? So all the areas where parking is allowed now in this neighborhood, I can envision creating a new parking district. Maybe it would be the Charles Bank Road area parking district. And where parking is allowed now, whatever it is, would all be changed to be more consistent. It could be a 2-hour limit, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., except Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, or by resident permit, or something else. But the idea is to create a more consistent regulation across, all the streets in this neighborhood, to better utilize the public way and to give more opportunities for all the different residents to be able to park on the public way. Charles Bank Terrace is a private way, so that's a little bit different. If they were to be interested, we would need to hear from all of the abutters that they would like to join a parking district like this. So again, here is a image of all the different regulations as they exist right now, and then an idea to change them all to be consistent, to create a neighborhood parking district with all the areas shown in purple where you could park now. Could be a 2-hour limit, for example, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., except Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. So, the advantage, well, I guess one disadvantage is we can't really try it out in advance. It's a much bigger change. We can't just change a couple signs and see how it goes. It would be changing a lot of signs and requiring people to buy permits that don't have to have permits right now. But there's some advantages. It creates a more similar parking regulations across the area. It does allow some short-term parking opportunities without the need to have a permit. If someone has, a visitor or, a service worker coming, they could park on these streets shown in purple for 2 hours without worrying about going to get a permit or getting someone's visitor's pass to be able to park there. It would also allow residents who live on streets like Orchard Street, to be able to get a permit to park on a nearby street, right? Orchard Street, William Street, Charles Bank Terrace. I think it better uses those area where those 6 meters are located. And I just think it's using the space more efficiently. Remember that slide that showed some areas are heavily parked up and some are lightly parked up and some you can't even park, right? Or it's so restricted that it's, hard to use. So, so that's the presentation that I have with the 3 different options. I just want to take a quick look to see how many people we have on the call. Okay, we have some, but we did notify every single household, every single address in this whole area, right, Danielle? I think we sent out, do you remember how many notifications we sent out?
There was 110 notifications mailed.
All right, so this was widely notified in the neighborhood. But now we're looking forward to hearing some feedback. So I see we have several hands up. Let's start with Andrea Newman.
Hi.
Right. We just need to know your address, please.
21 Russell Road. I'm on the little tiny street in question, and I was under the impression that the whole reason for this docket was because of Russell Road, was because the neighborhood of Russell Road wanted something to be done about the parking. No, but it seems, I mean, I appreciate all the work you've done. It's extensive, and I think some of those plans are great. But the main thing was about changing Russell, not changing the rest of the neighborhood. And it seems like, why are we changing all the streets around Russell when the original problem was just Russell? And
Well,
even
I mean,
your
yeah, I think,
data shows that Russell is, you know, by far the most crowded street.
well, I think it's not only Russell Road that's the problem. That's the problem that you heard when you came to a traffic council meeting, when Russell Road was docketed. We have definitely heard many, many times from the residents of Jefferson Street over the years that the parking regulation on Jefferson Street does not work for them. We've heard complaints from residents who live on Orchard that they have nowhere to park, and, you know, they're paying taxes and they can't park anywhere near their house.
But there's nowhere to
So,
park on Orchard unless you widen the street. You can't,
right,
you
right,
can't get down that street if one person parks on it.
right. So we
So
can't
there's
allow
nothing they can
parking.
do about it.
Well, there is something we could do about it, and those are some of the options that we've talked about.
Right, okay. But I'm just talking about, I thought this was more about Russell because was the original meeting I went to was about.
Right.
Yeah. I just don't understand why we can't have one of the signs on our street that, instead of changing everybody else's signs, because that would help. But I mean, but I do like some of your suggestions. I think they're great.
I mean, I think we're having a discussion to try to think more comprehensively, like we have done in many neighborhoods across the city, right? To try and think more fairly, more reasonably, you know, to give everybody an opportunity to use our public ways.
Yep. Yep. I mean,
Yes.
I'm fine with getting a permit. That's fine. With, you know, as long
The
as
other,
something gets
if you
done.
remember that that the other issue that we had with Russell Road is that it was hard to think about how to post signs on Russell Road itself because of, you know, just the way that the street is. It was hard to think about, you know, how to post signs. So I think we started thinking about, well, if you don't really change Russell Road, but you make a change nearby, maybe that could help Russell Road without the need to post signs on the street.
That would be great.
Yeah. I see the next person's Kathy P.
Hello,
Hi, if you could just say your name and your address,
my name
please.
is Daniel Paglia. I live at 138 Charles Bank Road. And I'm totally against any changes on Charles Bank Road. It's a very narrow street. There's congested. There's only parking on the left-hand side, which is my side. There are 48 units that are capable of getting permits on the small one-way section of Charles Bank Road. I see no reason to add more permits or more parking on my road that I can't even get in my driveway half the time. They're parking in front of parking meters. It's very congested. It's very small. All these other streets have parking in their driveways, at least 2-car parking. Across the street from me is 2 3-family homes and a multiple 2-family with multiple cars.
I'm sorry, were you cut off or were you, I think that we lost him. Okay, maybe he'll come back. I see the next person is Doug Halsam.
Hand back up.
There we go. Okay. Hi, yeah, I'm Doug Haslam. I live on 26 Nonantum Place. Actually lived on Orchard Street prior to that, so I understand the issues there. One thing I wanted to, Mr. Paglia, did you want to finish? I'll let the moderator decide there.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and finish,
Okay.
Mr. Haslam?
Oh, sure. I should be quick. So I was here when the resident permits were instituted on Nonantum Place. Originally, there was no restriction on parking, and people would park here all day, as you suggested, and either we assumed we're taking the bus to work in the city or doing whatever. So the 2-hour limit was put in as a trial. And the problem persisted, which suggested that it was people working in the area who would park their car and then move it after 2 hours to another space on our street. So we still couldn't park on our own street. And Nonantum Place, if you've seen, a number of the houses don't even have off-street parking. So we need to be parking on the street. So that's why we were allowed to have the restriction. I understand the needs of the other streets, but I just think that the 2-hour limit is just going to invite, the chaos that we had prior to getting the resident permit in there. I do like the idea of kind of merging the permits into an area, but not the 2-hour, or having only the 2-hour limit, because it didn't solve the problem, and that's why the restrictions were put in the first place.
Right. So you're not a fan of option 2.
Right. And option 3 I like, but not the 2-hour limit part of it. If it were resident permit parking, but the other streets were allowed to mix and match a little bit to resolve some of the issues, like on Orchard Street, I get that.
Right. And then we have option 1, which is, again, at Traffic Council, we had a very similar discussion on Judith Road. This was, I don't remember, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago when we put bike lanes in on Walnut Streets. All the parking was removed on Walnut Street, and the Walnut Street neighbors had nowhere to be able to park. Judith Road at the time was restricted at all times for residents. So, I mean, I remember that meeting very well. I don't know if the other Traffic Council members remember. That the Judith Road residents were not happy. They did not want to change the regulation on their street, but we did a trial, and we tried to see what would happen if we created, instead of resident only at all times, if it became resident only 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And I don't think we've heard any complaints. We did vote to make that permanent. So that's why I thought of option 1, something very similar on these 2 streets. I see Rahul Gupta. You have your hand up.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul and my wife, Catherine. We live in 19 Orchard Street.
I'm sorry, what's your address?
19 Orchard Street.
Orchard Street, okay.
Yep.
So, So, everybody knows the situation here. We do, as was mentioned, have parking spaces in our driveway, but we have a tandem driveway, 2 cars. So like the previous issue is we can't have workers come or visitors come. I had somebody come to try to fix the stove once who told me he would refuse to park on Charles Bank because he gets a ticket every time. So it's just sort of a constant source of tension in that sense. So our preference, I mean, it's a comprehensive plan. We hadn't been part of the earlier discussion, so actually it's very impressive, all the data and everything you have. If we had a vote, we would say number 3. If there's a lot of pushback, like I know at Russell Road, they're a little hesitant about doing a full permit for the whole area. I mean, even if we would just love the opportunity to, even on this tiny little street that has no parking, to maybe even just get a permit, if that's nothing. But I mean, I appreciate the idea that it's better for everyone if everyone is comfortable with number 3.
Yeah.
That would be sort of, I think, understandably our vote.
Yeah, I think the Orchard Street is the only 2-way street here in this neighborhood, almost. So why should we be suffering from no parking?
Yeah, it's very
from this in this neighborhood.
It's narrow. It's no way there could be.
We have 3 kids under the age of 5, and we have babysitters. Every time they come, we have to move the cars around to accommodate someone. We have to tell people to take tea instead. We can't have visitors over. The 2-hour limit will not work for us also, although it sounds nice. It would not work. And
we have noticed
on Charles Bank, it's a wide road also. I mean, I'm not sure.
Compared to Orchard, probably not wide.
Compared to Orchard Street, yes, of course. But it's like you said, your observation, we agree with it also. It's underutilized as well.
Yeah.
And we don't need to park there all the time. We just need the opportunity to be able to park for a few hours whenever we need it.
Yeah.
We don't like the idea of 2-hour limit. Again, it creates more logistics with little kids and things to do. But at least some flexibility should be there for streets like us, where
And I feel like our points are
Yeah.
similar to the previous discussion point, where, it's the same issues, service workers and
Yeah.
visitors and just logistics of
Yeah.
that, so.
we don't expect a lot of people to move their cars from the driveway to the street. But if that seems like an unfounded concern.
So similar, very, very similar situation as, that we had on Phillips Lane, where it wasn't wide enough to allow parking, but we just voted to allow them to park on a nearby street where parking is more available. Other comments from the public? Anyone? We really want to hear from the public to help us figure out what the best plan of action would be.
David, there's several more people who would like to speak.
Okay, I don't see any hands though. Let me
Okay,
click through.
I'll-
Now I'm sorry. Now I see them.
You see them?
Jennifer Brabander.
Thank you very much for hosting this conversation. I think it's something that's critical for our neighborhood, and I appreciate my neighbors on the call and your attention to the situation in our neighborhood. I'm Dan Bravander. My spouse is Jennifer. We're at 22 Jefferson Street. And I would just point out, I think that in this neighborhood, the 1-hour parking limit just doesn't work. It's not tractable for the residents, who almost all of us have shared driveways. So you go to the grocery store and you park on the street and you unload your car, and it doesn't work for the residents. And then also, because it's not policed regularly, we end up having vehicles that are on the street for days on end without being ticketed. But on the flip side of that, the residents are worried about bringing that to the attention of the parking folks, because we are often also, as residents, on the street for more than an hour. So that seems like just the sort of worst possible scenario that we have currently in Jefferson. And I really support the idea of trying to normalize a little bit in the neighborhood and having this residential system. And I also note that I think I walk my dog a tremendous amount in this neighborhood, and the parking meters are really underutilized. So I think that is an experiment that happened, but I think that that is not, the commuters are not using it, and then it's sort of an ideal spot for some folks in the neighborhood that could be utilizing them. But I just mostly want to say thank you for this meeting, and I'm anxious to see some change as a result of our conversation.
Thank you for that comment. We've heard for a long time that the regulations are not working well for the residents of Jefferson Street or Orchard Street or Russell Road. So that's why we're taking this opportunity to try to think more holistically how we can share our resources. I see Cliff Stolze.
Hi, yes, I'm at Cliff Stoltz and my wife Carol, and we're at 102 Charles Bank Road. We're like the first house, well, the second house on Charles Bank Road on the left after, and when you come up into the one-way street, a one-way portion of Charles Bank Road. And we've been here close to 30 years now. I had a couple questions, and then I'll make some comments. But first of all, thanks for doing this, and it does look like there's a lot of thought, good ideas going on here. Are the people east of St. James on Charles Bank able to get resident parking on our portion of the one-way portion of Charles Bank? That's something I'm not clear on, because our end of Charles Bank Road is usually pretty full of cars, and I often think it's people who live down down the two-way section of Charles Bank Road that are parking up at our end of Charles Bank Road. But I wasn't sure if they are doing that legitimately or not.
So your question is, do the residents who live on the opposite side of St. James, are they eligible to
Yeah,
get
well,
resident permits?
yeah, if you follow, if you're going down towards the river on Charles Bank Road, are they eligible for to park on the one-way section of Charles Bank Road?
Yeah, Isaac, is that something you can quickly just look in the TPR in the section that's resident permit parking? Just do a search on that real fast and see exactly what it says for Charles Bank, if it, you know, subdivides the street in some way, or if it just says Charles Bank Road, because I never thought about that question.
Yeah, because like I said, from our house to the corner, there's almost always cars there.
Always
So
cars.
if you were looking around, I'm not sure if you noticed, maybe that's where, when you only saw a couple of cars, that's where they were. So anyway, that's just one question I had about this.
Do you notice if the cars that are parking there have permits, or if they're just parking there without a permit?
I see both. And once in a while you do see a ticket, but a lot of times they go for a while without the cars without permits are not getting ticketed. And I wasn't even clear, and Andrea was on someone I know on Russell Road. I wasn't sure that there was parking on both sides of that road, or maybe just nobody is too narrow to park on both sides. But I thought they were only parking on the one side of that street.
Well, so there are no official restrictions on the street. If we have a 220-page document,
Yeah,
which lists every single restriction on every street in the city, and it's not listed. So that means you
Well,
could
maybe
legally park on either side of Russell Road. People wouldn't, for the most part, because then you block the way. You can't get down. But we do sometimes see cars parked for sure on both sides of the dead end section, like as you get closer to the end.
yes, down at the bottom. Yes, I have seen that too.
And I see commuters parking on Russell Road, and then they put their backpacks on and go to the bus.
Yeah.
And there's only like 8 spaces available there, and they're taking up at least 2 spots there, 2 or 3 spots.
Right, and so that's not really where we would like to see the commuters. We would like to see them use the long-term meters, but
right.
they don't.
And that would be my fear also, like before we had any resident parking here on Charles Bank Road, it was solid commuter parking all along our road. So there definitely, I see your options, and we definitely have to have something.
The reason I mean, I like the third option if it was just still you had to have parking permit to park there, and not that it was 2-hour options. But I know you have to do something. But I do think that it's if you leave it open to just 2 hours at any point, I know not many cars would be, like you said, that it's almost better to go with the 9 to 11 every day, and to discourage the parking. Maybe it's even 9 to 12, or make it even a little longer. And that might be worth the experiment. Of all the options, I thought that was maybe the best one, instead of just saying 2 hours any time of the day.
So you are supporting a version of option 3.
Well, I thought that
which would not be a 2-hour limit except by permit. It would be something like no parking 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. except by permit.
Well, actually, what I was saying is I like option 3, but just without any free parking or non-resident parking allowed. But I like the idea that anybody in the neighborhood could park on any street, because I do think other parts of Charles Bank Road are underutilized and they should be shared. I just know ours gets filled. But I was going to say, of the other options, I think it was your first option, which said 9 to 11 was, because then you could at least monitor it. And that's what I said, if that was 9 to 12 instead of 9 to 11 or something, and it was actually monitored, that might help discourage people from parking there.
And again, the big advantage of this option is we could easily try it.
Yeah. And
It'd be easier to monitor it too, I think.
It'd be, yeah, and if you actually do get out there and look, that if there are cars there, people could even call in if they're seeing the cars there hanging around all day or something. And if I know from other experiences downtown, in the Fort Point area and other things where there are 2-hour restrictions, they just don't get monitored every day. People, it's because of how much it costs to park in the garages down there. It's worth it to just see if you get a $40 ticket, then pay $25 or $28 every day. And the amount of times that you get a ticket, you're saving money by getting tickets than you are for paying for parking. So that's my concern about the 2-hour restrictions.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. I see April Kabish. Is that how you say it?
It's April Kabash. I'm at 9 Russell Road at the bottom of Russell.
Oh, yes.
Right at the end.
The little garden, right?
Yeah, that's right. The little sculpture garden.
Sculpture garden.
It's not possible really I know that there is no signage, but you really can't have cars parking on both sides of Russell Road. It's just, we do it when there's deliveries or construction workers, but it's impossible. And so even though there are no signs posted, it's kind of understood that you can only park on the right side when you're going down Russell Road. So it's not possible to have cars on both sides. And I think just hearing from other people that have experience with whether it's a 2-hour or 1 hour or 3-hour limit, it doesn't seem to be that effective. And so I don't know, I would like to consider option 3. I would like to understand better that if the streets within that zone are considered a neighborhood parking zone, does that mean that the permit that everyone would get would apply to any of the streets in the zone, regardless of where you live? Or does it have to be that you pick a certain street?
Right. So that's an excellent question. So let's say that we all decide, and we would not be able to take any action today on option 3. We just wanted to we could take an action on option 1 or 2 if we want to just change the signs and do a trial. But option 3 is much more involved. We would need to hold this item, modify it however we say, write up all the specific language that we would need to vote on, and come to another meeting and vote on it. But if there's a consensus, if there's a sense that people prefer option 3, then maybe that's what would happen. So the way that parking districts work all across Newton, we have 6 or 7 different village parking districts, right? In Newtonville and Newton Highlands and Waban and other places. The way that they work is that people who live on a particular street that's in the parking district get a permit, a sticker and a visitor permit that say the name of the street that they live on, and that's the street that they would be able to park on, right? So if you live on Jefferson Street, you would get a permit that says Jefferson Street. If you live on Charles Bank Road, you would get a permit that says Charles Bank Road. If you live on Orchard Street, right, since there's no parking available on Orchard Street, if it's in a parking district, you would be able to get a permit to park on a nearby street. That's just exactly what we just talked about in the last item, right? Which was on Phillips Lane. There was no parking on Phillips Lane, but they are now in the parking district, so they can get a permit to park on a nearby street. So same thing for William Street, right? There's 2 or 3 houses on William Street where there's no parking, and Charles Bank Terrace also, right? So I think that that answers your question. It's not that you could park anywhere in the whole neighborhood. You would get a permit to park on your street.
Can I qualify the question? So this is the way it is in other neighborhoods. I hail from Montreal. In Montreal, you're in a zone. You could park anywhere in that zone because your street, even though you have a permit to park, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be places available. So you go to a neighboring street and you're able to park. Has it ever been considered that a neighborhood zone be just that? It's a zone that you park as close as you can to where you live.
Yeah, we don't, that is, and what you're describing is really what they have in South Boston or in Cambridge. You get a permit to park anywhere in the entire city, but that's not how it's developed here in Newton over the years. It sort of started out with, individual streets here or there that just would get a permit that said, that if you live on the street, you can get a permit and you're the only one that could park on the street. That's how it started, like 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And it sort of
things
grew
have
up into
changed
that. And it has not,
enormously.
it's actually seems like it, in my opinion, this is the system that has worked pretty well wherever we've developed it. We would have to think of whether it would work here. I think on Jefferson Street, there's a lot of units and maybe a small, not so many parking spaces. So I'm not sure, but right now, maybe we could try something different. But that is what, I guess, one of the reasons we're having this discussion, to see what the police, the traffic bureau has to say about, allowing something different in this one particular neighborhood, to allow residents to park on any of the streets shown in purple, or if that's maybe not workable for some reason. But it's a very good idea. It's something that we have thought about.
David, just to jump in on that idea. So in that scenario, we'd be looking to change some of the language around neighborhood parking districts, and it could just be to this one. We don't have to go back and change other ones if there's not an issue. Some of the other
we definitely wouldn't want to change, like in Newtonville, you wouldn't want, the whole reason for developing that parking district was so that residents, students would not be driving and parking extremely close to the school. And you wouldn't want to give a permit to someone to drive over and park right next to the school, for example.
Yeah. And so we also had the idea of having contiguous streets make up a district. I wonder if that would have to be true here as well or not. The reason I ask is I get the sense that the northern part of Charles Bank Road, so basically between St. James and Orchard Street, that's a little bit more heavily utilized than that bottom half. Like, I wonder if we target that bottom half as the area that has a lot more open space to maybe take on the folks that are really struggling on some of the streets that don't have any parking at all. I know that's a little bit of a farther distance to go from Russell Road, and maybe that doesn't quite work for Russell Road, but that might be helpful for Orchard Street, for example.
Yeah,
And then
maybe.
that way, you know, if folks are not very amenable on that first half of Charles Bank Road, we're not really affecting them at all. They don't need to be in the district.
Well, I think in this case, if you live on Orchard Street, you would park as close as you can to Orchard Street, not all the way at the end of Charles Bank Road, probably, right?
Sure, depends.
Yeah.
Depends what they're willing to do. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah,
I mean, the
we-
other thing to think about is, you know, we have already a pretty complicated system of different, you know, different villages having different characteristics and different, you know, things going on. And there's something to be said for some level of simplicity, trying to keep things as similar as we can, you know?
Yep.
So let me just go back up. There might be other comments. Oh, yes. Okay. So Elizabeth Ross, you haven't spoken yet, right? And you would just need, are you able to unmute or, okay.
Hey, David, let's go back to.
Okay, I did,
Okay.
yeah, the host allowed me to unmute. My name's Elizabeth Ross. I live at 20 Jefferson Street, and I just wanted to echo my neighbor Dan's thanks for this forum and for coming to us and just asking us, you know, what we'd prefer. I think I very much agree with what Doug and Dan said about the 1 hour parking, the 2 hour parking not working for our neighborhood. You know, we do have people who have really been parking in front of our houses just for months. And I think they're kind of gaming the system. You know, it's cheaper to risk the ticket than to actually pay for parking somewhere. And it just creates a situation where we can't like go to the grocery store and then come home, park in front of our house and unload our groceries. You know, we have to park somewhere else, or you know, in the driveway on a hill and take our groceries in. So it's very impactful. I would love an option, and I think Jefferson Street in general feels this way, where Jefferson Street could be included in some kind of resident parking. This would give us the advantage of, you know, if there was a situation where someone was really just using our street for regular parking who didn't live here, where, you know, we could call the parking surveillance people without risking our neighbors getting a ticket and just creating that kind of situation. So either option 1 or option 3, but with option 1 with Jefferson Street having some resident parking as well.
Okay. Councilor Greenberg, did you want to speak now, or did you want to wait until all the residents have spoken?
Thank you, Mr. Costas. I just have a quick question. I'm just a little confused about option 1. How would that help the folks on Russell Road with option 1?
Okay. So the idea for option 1, okay, don't forget that what we have now is a situation where there's no restrictions at all on
Right.
Russell Road, and there's no ability to park anywhere nearby,
Right.
right? Ever. You can't park on Charles Bank Terrace. You can't park on Charles Bank Road. So the
Right.
idea, part of the idea for option 1 is to ease the restriction on Charles Bank Road so that you still need a permit to be able to park there all day. But after 11 o'clock, some of those vehicles might not need to park on Russell Road. They could park on Charles Bank Road instead, right? And so that the idea is that could help ease, the congestion and the unsafe conditions that we have on Russell Road without the need to figure out how to post signage on Russell Road.
So folks who live on Russell Road could park on Charles Bank Road after 11 o'clock all day.
Right.
They wouldn't
Right.
need, okay, so you would only need a resident sticker between 9 and 11.
Right. So all the Charles Bank Road folks who already have a permit, they would
Yeah.
just keep their permit, right?
Uh-huh.
The signs right now say resident permit required at all times every day. And so those signs would change, that you
Yeah.
do need to have a permit between 9 and 11, just like we did on Judith Road, right?
I see. I see. Okay.
So it's sort of easing the restriction. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, right?
Right.
That's the reason that we threw out the option to maybe do it as a trial and see.
And would that be the same for the folks on Orchard Street? They'd be able to do the same?
Yeah, Orchard Street is just exactly like what we had for the Walnut Street residents, that they had nowhere to park. Now we changed Judith Road so they could wait until 11 o'clock. I mean, I remember very well the residents of Walnut Street saying, what are we going to do? We have to sit Shiva and there's nowhere to park.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
so after 11, they could have their guests park on Judith Road. It
Yeah.
eased the burden for them, and
Yeah.
it, shared the city resources in a way that we now have a bike lane on Walnut
Right.
Street, right? So
So I-
it's very similar, like the Orchard Road residents would not be able to park on Charles Bank between 9 and 11, but they have some opportunity after 11 to park there.
Okay. So perhaps doing a trial and then working our way toward a neighborhood parking program would be the way to go, but I'd like to hear what more folks have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that might be a good option because we don't know what would happen, and it's an easy thing to try. We could try it and see what happens, and if it's not workable, try something else. Okay, I see Kathy P. I see that you're anxious to speak. If you could unmute, and we're happy to hear you.
We got somehow disconnected earlier.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So I'm at
Sorry.
138 Charles Bank Road. The home has been in our family for over 100 years. We've been here for 45 years. In the last 10 years, we've had multiple problems of parking on our street, getting in our driveway. From St. James Street to just a little past Orchard Street, the street is full of cars. Down the end, maybe a little less used that you're talking about where the parking meters are and that where it winds around is a little bit less used. But the rest of the road, including in front of our home, is always full of cars. And we have difficult time getting into our driveway. I understand Russell Road and I understand Orchard Street. They do have parking in their driveways. When I count how many permits are available on Charles Bank Road, it's like 180 just for the small one-way street of Charles Bank Road that are available for people to get. Across the street from my home, there are multi-family homes with 8 and 10 cars, and the only place for them to park is on our side of the street. So I don't know what your calculations are of how, by giving Orchard and Russell and Charles Bank and some of non-Anthem parking permits onto Charles Bank, how many that adds to when there's only 30 parking spaces. I'm totally against a 9 to 11. That just invites more people to the road, a very small road, that more people to park that are working up in Newton Corner or in all the different places after 11 o'clock. You're just inviting more people to a very small, congested street, a one-way street that's not very wide. And we have difficulty getting in our driveway. We just recently finally got a sign for 5 feet from the driveway, which still isn't enough to make a swing with a big stone, 150-year-old stone wall in front of our home. Now, the 9 to 11 and all that trial will just bring more people to the neighborhood, more people to the end of the road. The area is not policed. The meter maid comes maybe once every 3 Saturdays. That's about the amount of time that we get anybody come down the road to see if people are parking to go up to Newton Corner. The meters are not used because the ones that are used, money is never even put in because we never get any meter made. I'm sorry, a traffic supervisor or a police car on this street. So if you're gonna calculate to add how many cars to Charles Bank Road with 30 parking spaces, when there's already 184 or so permits available, each home can get 4 permits, right? Each unit gets 4 permits. When you have a 3-family home, that's 12 parking permits. So across the street from me, there are 2, directly across, there are 2 3-family homes with 12 permits, 24 permits that can be used parking in front of our home. So why we can't park in front of our home if we want, because there are always cars parked in front of our home. So your calculations have to be how many more permits you want to add to Charles Bank, because the very end of Charles Bank Road maybe is not as used as the rest. The other gentleman that said he was at 102, when you come around, if you come around from St. James Street and take the left, half the time you have a difficult time taking the left because there's cars parked right to the end there. So you may think it's underused by you driving by a couple of times, but I don't see that for the majority of the road. But 9 to 11 is only going to bring more people to a small street with kids. We just, in my email that I sent you earlier, I didn't get any response from anybody. We mentioned that there wasn't even a crosswalk for the kids to park, to the kids to cross the street to get on the bus. Finally, the other day, they came and put a crosswalk. I mean, this is how underserved Charles Bank Road is. So if you're going to add 6 or 8 homes on Orchard Street with 4 permits per home, and 4 permits per home on Russell, and 4 permits per home on Charles Bank Terrace and all the rest, what is that going to do for us being able to get in and out of our driveway?
Thank you. Other comments? I see Councillor Downs. Do you want to speak now, or do you want to wait?
We have a few other people talking. Let's finish the public comment. I thought we were getting close because I only saw one hand.
Yeah, Rahul Gupta.
I know we spoke earlier, but I just wanted to actually just have a point of clarification so I can understand as well. So option 1, I guess for Orchard Street, so for option 1, the permit would be that Russell becomes permit only and they get their own permits for their road, as well as
Option 1 does not add any permits for anyone.
So
there's no permits.
So Russell Road residents they would be able to move over, I see. Okay, so I guess then just to speak for Orchard, because I don't think anyone else on our street, like that is those are the only options that don't, I mean, the only way we get parking is if we're grouped with what our neighbor was just mentioning, that we would be grouped with people who are commuters or living outside the neighborhood. And I agree with him in that point, that I do think it's unfair to open it up to, anybody working or coming from outside. If you've been, I know you know the area, we're this insulated little block of homes. So I think, for the people of our street, I think it would be unfair to us and probably everybody else in Charles Bank to open it up for that many more people. But I would sort of appeal to the sympathies of the rest of the community to understand. We do have 2 parking spaces in tandem, but we are 2 vehicle family, as most people here, and we don't have any time where we can have a visitor or somebody service without it being a stress for us to do. So
I mean, many times if we do have visitors, you have to ask somebody on the Charles Bank, some neighbors, to give us a visitor pass.
Yeah, we're constantly asking, can we park in the driveway
people
for a few
messaging in
minutes,
the group, hey, somebody has a spare parking pass for a couple of hours. So I mean, that's not the way to live here.
I mean,
one option
we have no plan of parking on the street all the time, which is, I can understand that fear. Like, yes, and most people wouldn't, I think.
No.
There are only 6, 7 houses. I think the ones on the corner are already eligible for passes, so they're already parking occasionally. So it's not a massive street. And so I would just hope that would be a consideration for some solution, that if it is too complicated to open it up, that it just is understanding that solution you offered for number 3 is really only adding us onto Charles Bank, from my understanding. So option 3 would be, from what you had explained earlier, I think, is that everybody would have the permit, but only on their own roads. So the areas, whatever the number of houses would be eligible. So in practice, it wouldn't be, I don't think, too much of a change for the people already on the streets who have parking.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
can,
so that's an important point that you just made. If we do like option 3, it's the Charles Bank Road neighbors that would get Charles Bank Road permits. The Orchard Street neighbors would become eligible for Charles Bank Road permits, right? Jefferson Street would be able to park longer than 1 hour on Jefferson Street. Probably no change. Nonanta Place, an extended parking area on Charles Bank Road, because we would be removing the 6 parking meters. We would need to think about Maple Street, because right now you can see on this map, you could park on both sides. We might want to think about restricting one side or the other of Maple Street, especially there's a new house being built right there. It might not be safe to actually allow parking on both sides. And we would definitely need to make a change on Russell Road, because you can't effectively park on both sides of Russell Road. We would have to figure out a way to post signs and restrict parking on one side, probably the west side of Russell Road. But like what you said, yeah, I think we would just be adding the permits for this nearby streets, the nearby taxpayers who do not have on-street parking. Maybe the 2-hour limit is the part of the problem here, the idea of having a 2-hour limit except by permit. That's something that we could think about changing. Maybe it's not a 2-hour limit, although that is exactly what we have in many of the parking districts across the city, is a 2-hour limit, because that's what the residents find easy and comfortable to, allow some level of parking on the public way for some amount of time without worrying about getting a ticket if they have their visitors coming or service workers. But if we are saying that a 2-hour limit might not work in this neighborhood, we could think of some other way to have some level of public use of all these public streets, right? It's not private property. None of these public streets are private property except for Charles Bank Terrace, of course, right? So we have to think of a fair and effective way to accommodate a lot of different needs on these public ways. I see Councilor Downs.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of support for trying option 3. And I would remind people it's a trial. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we'll be back in to have a conversation about it. It's starting to get late. I don't think we make great decisions much after 9 o'clock. So I would suggest we move the question and have something that we can try in the next couple of months. One reason I like the idea of having permits, particularly here where it's very tight parking, is that we're going to be talking about removing the overnight parking ban. There's going to be a ballot question to that effect, and neighborhoods that have permits and time limits will have an additional layer of protection from long-term storage of cars on the street that might be a longer term issue for them. And this neighborhood does seem to have some pretty wildly misallocated space resources. So I will move option 3 and see what my colleagues have to say.
Okay, thank you. So I want to thank all the members of the public for providing input. We're gonna now have a discussion among the members of Traffic Council. Let's remember that option 1 seems to be, in my mind, something that's easy to try to sort of see what happens. It is something that we could vote on if we want to tonight to try that. Option 3, I don't think that we've ever created a neighborhood parking district as a trial because, you know, there's a lot involved. First, we have to write the language, but really it's the residents that would need to go and get permits. All the new signs would need to be posted. It's not just a trial like option 1 or 2, where you would take down one sign on a pole and put up a new sign, right? We're not like taking down a resident permit all time sign and putting up a 2-hour a no parking 9 to 11 sign in the exact same spot. This is a much bigger change. I don't know that we've ever, I mean, on the other hand, these are parking regulations. It's not permanent, right? Anything could change. If you think about that as a trial in that way, just approving something, and if it doesn't work, you could change it again. But it's a bigger thing to move forward with and to.
I may have misspoken. You've got option 3 up there, but then you've got the no parking 2-hour limit resident permit up there. And you know, a lot of that is no parking. The rest of it is 2-hour limits that, you know, with the permit. So you have to change the signs, and you would have to do that if you were to change the parking on one side of Charles Bank or, you know, one side of Maple or something like that. Anyway, this would just, you would be getting permits, but we have several streets that are already getting permits.
Right. So if we want to move forward with option 3, we would change all all the area shown in red is already no parking, right? So we're only talking about the areas in purple, although again, we would probably need to have a discussion about what should we change on Maple Street and what should we change on Russell Road. We should not allow parking legally on both sides, right? Then we would change all the signs, you know, add new signs, including on Maple Street, on Russell Road, figure out where the signs would be able to be posted on Russell Road. Then we would tell the residents who live on all these areas, you know, to go and get a permit from the traffic bureau. And so right now, the only ones that have permits are just on the 2 streets, Charles Bank and Nonantum Place. The Jefferson Street folks, they don't have permits. Orchard Street, you know, Russell Road, Maple Street, they don't have permits. So they would need to go and get permits if we were to move forward with option 3. It does seem like there is support for option 3. I want to hear from Mitch and from others. I don't know that there's support for the 2-hour limit piece of this option 3, if something else might be more palatable. So let's see what Mitch has to say. I saw you, Mitch, but now I don't see you. Are you? Oh, there you are again. Yes. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So I've been listening to the conversation, and you know, I agree with Councilor Downs about option 3, probably without the 2 hours. But I guess I feel a little bit of the frustration, which is why I opposed holding it in April for the petition by Sue Klein for 12 Russell, because I'm just wondering, first of all, is a trial appealable?
I don't think that we would be doing a trial if it's option 3. That's what I'm saying. I think we would be voting to make a change.
Okay. So that's certainly appealable, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But we wouldn't be voting tonight, or we would
if
be
we
voting
decide to move forward with option 1 or 2, that would be a trial that is not appealable. If we decide to move forward with some kind of neighborhood parking district like option 3, that would be appealable, but we can't vote on that today, of course. And we need to figure out more details.
Yeah. So the comment I was going to make is that, you know, in April, we reviewed this item, and, you know, we're coming back tonight and we're putting the Russell Street issue into, you know, this larger issue, which is going to take more time. I sort of have the inclination from listening to people that there's going to be an appeal on it. It's going to go on for a longer period of time, you know, through the winter, maybe into the middle of next year. And in this particular situation, Russell Street is still existing as a problem. So I guess what I was thinking is that, you know, and it's probably not tonight because you haven't advertised it, but that we have a trial for Russell Street. We have a trial to allow Russell Street occupants to actually get permits on the adjoining street on Charles Bank. It's a fairly limited number of people. And we try that out and see if it works. And if it works, then maybe that's a good indication that we go for the larger look. But in the meantime, we give Russell Street some relief, and that trial then would not be appealable. And it would give them an immediate relief and an immediate access into some other parking. I mean, I guess to me, there's a fairness issue here. They came in front of us looking for relief. We opened it up to, I mean, I understand the larger issue, and there've been, you know, several streets that have come before the committee that, you know, this would deal with it. But I also feel that we're kind of not being fair to Russell Street. So I guess my thought would be, as we go back and look at it, maybe we consider coming back with a trial. I guess we can't do that tonight anyway for Russell Street because it's not advertised. And anyway, you know, that's
So
my
Mitch, I
thought.
don't think that we have any process that would allow us to do what you are suggesting. I think you're suggesting that we do a trial to allow residents who live on one street to be able to get permits to park on a standalone street that's not part of any parking district. And that seems to me is not something that we have the ability to do. I think it's specifically not allowed to allow unless it's part of a comprehensive parking district.
So you're saying, David, that on a trial basis, we can't do a trial for a street that's not in the district. We have to actually take a vote and do it the other way, right?
I think so. What do, you know, Isaac or Captain Divine, do you agree with my interpretation, or is it something we need to talk about? I don't think we've ever done, you know, approved, you know, anywhere to allow residents on one street to park on a standalone street nearby. In fact, I think we've done the opposite, and we've specifically not allowed it. I think that there's an ordinance that does not allow us to be able to do that unless it's like on a corner parcel.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So this would be like
So that's the
Phillips
whole
Street,
reason
right?
that the city council created the opportunity for traffic council to create neighborhood parking districts so that we can look at it more holistically and have more flexibility in what we can do.
Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Other members of traffic council?
Yeah, I'd like to flush out more internal conversations of how we, you know, produce a new discussion around option 3. I think there are other good background conversations to have. I think we should consider something. Jefferson could almost move on like a parallel track for its own thing, sort of in the scenario that we don't succeed with the neighborhood parking district. Russell Road could also. I do think if we were to try to tackle Russell Road on its own, sort of back to the April meeting, what we had trouble with was the signs. But, you know, if we come to find out that folks are amenable to signs, so on the west side of the road, if folks are open to signs going sort of at the back of sidewalk, almost encroaching like where the property line is, like that's definitely not aesthetically pleasing. I will not say that, but it will be the way for the signs and posts to actually survive a narrow roadway and snow clearing operations. So folks can feel welcome to email us about that or have that conversation proactively Otherwise, we're pretty much stuck with trying to post a couple signs on 2 utility poles on the east side that somehow make it clear what the whole street restriction is, and that's very difficult.
Yeah, we had a real problem with that. Do you remember in Lower Falls, on a street in Lower Falls, it was,
Yeah,
we had to undo what we did before, which was like one
Yeah.
side posting the 2 different restrictions on, either side of the street, right?
Yep.
It was
Yep.
confusing and hard for people to understand. So we
Yep.
ended up undoing that.
Yeah,
Let me just ask, it seems like there's not much interest in option 2, but is there any interest in trying option 1 to see it's something that we could vote on, could try, could get some information on, or is it more clear that we want to move toward option 3? I mean, if that's the case, that's fine. I would like to be able to solve, to help the residents on all these streets to help. I mean, we could do something just for Jefferson Street and just for Russell Road, but I'm also concerned about the residents
Yeah.
of Orchard Street, right?
Yep.
And there's
Yep.
no solution for Orchard Street unless we have a neighborhood parking district.
Yes, yes. I'm happy to get another final comment from Ms. Newman.
Oh, is there someone else with their hand up? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone from the public that has their hand up still?
Yeah, she sort of bounced up and down.
Okay, if there's anyone from the public that wants to speak, this would be your last chance to raise your hand. Sue Klein, I see.
Hi, yes, thank you. And again, thank you for all the hard work on this. And I appreciate, I'm from Russell Road, 12 Russell Road. And I appreciate the thinking about if there's signs put on the right side and what that impact is of the road, and depending where this goes. And I think there may be an opportunity, maybe at the end of, there may be 2 places that signs could go that aren't all the way down the roads in front of people's houses, because of the size of our road, that actually is a challenge for those of us who live on the right-hand side. That's further down. I think, option 3 sounds like it could be a possibility. So thank you.
I agree with Sue, and thank you.
I'm sorry, who's speaking now?
Andrea Newman at
Okay,
20 Russell.
Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Sue just said. I understand that the signs are difficult, but we do have a sign at the top of the street, and we have a sign halfway down that says it's a dead end. The sign at the top of the street, it's a big telephone pole. It could just be a simple sign there saying that Russell Road is permit only parking, resident parking street. Because the issue for us really isn't that we don't want to park on Charles Bank or anywhere else. We just want our spaces and to be able to get down our street. And that's all.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I appreciate all your work. But I feel like we're making this into a bigger problem than what it originally was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just want to shut the door on folks reading that sign in that scenario and thinking it's okay to park on both sides without then also having clear no parking signs on the west side, which is difficult to do.
I think in the end, we might have to figure out how to post a sign on the west side, which will probably be knocked down regularly. Okay, so we're back to having several hands up. I see Ed. Can't read your last name. Munafo. I don't think you've spoken yet.
No, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I live on 8 Jefferson Street. I've been listening for quite a while to the whole discussion, and it seems very complicated. I know everybody's aware that all these streets are very narrow to begin with. So one thing I just want to go back to is Maple Street, which is right around the corner from where we live. Just to jump to that, Because I know we're all discussing Russell Road, which I walk down a lot, and I can't understand how anybody can find a place to park there. But it all seems pretty complicated. One thing I've noticed on Maple Street is that with that new house going in, people are parking on both sides of the road already. There are construction workers, of course, parking there. When that happens, there's only one passable lane to get through, and often you're going head to head with a car coming off of Nonantum Road, which is very difficult. The same thing happens on our street, but it's all what we've been living with for quite a while, which is you have traffic, pretty heavy traffic that tries to do a cut through, especially during the rush hour times in the afternoon. So you're coming down and you're often having to ditch or try to find a spot where you can get out of somebody's way. So I guess what I just want to throw into this discussion is somehow Maple Street, I don't think can work as a both sides of the street parking. It's just too narrow in the way it is right now. And at least with it on one side, you can get up and down. It's pretty dangerous. People come flying off of Nonantum Road, and we always joke around that it's an off ramp from the highway. You know, sometimes people go quite fast. They don't slow down at all. They don't follow the traffic pattern that the lanes put out. I've actually come down to the bottom of the hill to try and turn right on Nonantum Road and almost got hit in a head-on by people that cut diagonally across to make that left and go straight up Maple Street to get up to Galen Street. So when it's been the past couple of weeks, the workers have been there a lot and the residents on the other side of the street. So it's been very difficult to get up or down and pretty treacherous.
Right, thank you for that comment. That is exactly why I put this note on here. I don't know if you could, yeah, you can see the cursor. Just that if we decide to move forward with fleshing out more of this option 3, we should consider an additional restriction on Maple Street. And we should also, there's more work we would need to do with Charles Bank Terrace. Let me just ask the members of Traffic Council, we've heard a lot of public comment and great public comment. Would you like to continue hearing public comment, or should we bring the discussion to the members of Traffic Council and the city councilors?
I'm fine with another couple of hands, but yeah, after that, I agree.
Okay, so whoever has their hands up now.
Yeah.
Anyone who wishes to speak, put your hand up now. I see 2 hands.
Hello?
I see 2 hands,
Yep.
right? Okay, so Kathy P.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so I just, by listening to I mean, I commented earlier, but by listening to most of the residents here, I think the majority were against the trial of this 2-hour parking. So I don't think it would be fair at this point for you to vote on a trial when, from what I saw, the majority of people were more, I'm not even through it, but more leaning towards option 3. So I don't think it would be fair for you to vote on doing a trial when most of the residents, from what I listened to, were not exactly thrilled about a 2-hour parking that's going to bring more people to our neighborhood.
Thank you. Last comment from April Kabosh.
I think Sue also has her hand
Yes,
raised.
I do see that.
I'm just a bit concerned, and I appreciate everything that's been done, but we did bring up Russell Road in April. And now it seems like we might be moving towards an option 3, and that will take a fair amount of time to, you know, fine tune, get more feedback, approve, and move forward. So if we're heading towards a neighborhood parking district, we would be heading towards signage on Russell Road. And so what would be damaging now to do it in 2 phases? Could we not do phase 1 where we make Russell Road parking permit only? And it would be clear to the permit holders that it's on Russell Road and that we're only able to park on the one side of the street and not both sides. And in terms of the public, if they see public permit parking only, then we don't even have to qualify that it's one side of the street or the other. It's, the street is permit parking only. I just wonder about it being a 2-phase process. And it's not to the detriment of Orchard Street, and I feel for them. We're not going to be holding anything back on option 3. We're just going to be avoiding an extended delay likely through the winter where we just have a lot of problems.
Okay, thank you. I think that the way that we've been doing village parking districts all across the city is not like one street at a time. We've been creating something comprehensive, working on it, trying to figure out the best technique. If there's, if we truly believe that Russell Road is unsafe and there should be no parking, then the police do have the power to put in temporary no parking regulations on the whole street. If that will be helpful while this works its way through, that would be up to the police department to decide if it is actually unsafe to allow parking on Russell Road. So I would just recommend that we've heard of all these different, I know that, it started out with Russell Road, but even before Russell Road, we heard from, residents of Orchard Street and Jefferson Street. So it is a lot of different issues that I think we should solve together. Sue Klein, your last comment?
Okay.
And then Isaac after that.
Yes, just one quick follow-up comment on the idea of having signage on both sides. As a practical matter, no one ever parks on the left-hand side anyway. So because on Russell Road, it's a small road, and also it's a very highly used road to get through. I think Ed, if I say, mention how much he walks on it. Our road is the thoroughfare to get to Nonantum, and we have a lot of foot traffic on it. So they're just, I think, I don't know that we need signs on both sides of the road, of this road. It would be unusual for someone to plan to park on the left-hand side as a practical matter. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that if there is no parking allowed, then we need to post the signs, especially if we're gonna have signs on one side that say, you can't park there from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. except by permit, for instance. I think that might draw someone to look on the other side and say, okay, there's no signs on this side, I could park here, where maybe they don't right now. Okay, so thank you again, everyone from the public. This has been a great discussion. Let's move on to Isaac. Did you have your hand up first?
Yeah, so admittedly, I was thinking along the lines of what April mentioned, sort of taking a 2-phase approach. I would be open personally to continue to flesh out the neighborhood parking conversation. I think that's very interesting. And we might have some options there, but I'm open to not creating a neighborhood parking for Russell, but just going to a resident permit parking option for Russell Road. I'm personally fine with just having no restriction on the book on the west side as a trial again, so we don't have to post the signs. If it turns out the folks start parking on that side for whatever reason, we will have to come back and think about signage and a new restriction, but perhaps that won't happen. So I'm open to like a quicker meeting on just specifically Russell Road language, and then, taking at least a couple months to think about the neighborhood parking district. And again, not losing sight of Jefferson Street and Orchard Street concerns.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. I think we've come a long way with this discussion. It's not like we could vote right now anyway
Yep.
to make a change on Russell Road. We don't have any language in front of us to be able to vote on to change the TPR or whatever. I think that, I mean, we're not going to be able to hear this item, I think, at our October meeting because it's filled with so many other items across the city. But, I think November or December, I think we're close enough that it's not going to take months and months and months to just make the final decisions. We just need, I think that if this is where we're headed, we need to decide, what we want to do with Nonantum Terrace, I'm sorry, Charles Bank Terrace, what we want to do with Maple Street, and what the exact restriction is in all the areas shown in purple. Write up that language. I think it's easier and more efficient to just do that instead of doing one thing and then undoing it and then doing something else at the next meeting after that. So that's what I think. Councilor Downs.
Hi, Chair. I tend to agree with you. I want to see a comprehensive solution that ties together all the different parking regulations and makes it a lot simpler to enforce and makes it easier, as we heard from the neighbors, for them in good conscience to call in a parking violation, knowing that they're not turning their neighbors in and, possibly starting a back and forth that they really didn't want to start. And so I'm with you on just let's take the time to do this right and get it done. I hear the neighbors and patience on Russell Road, and I fully understand and sympathize. I just think when a neighborhood has come back and back and back multiple times, as this one really has, you have to take the time to really fix it rather than putting in multiple changes that you're then going to have to undo. So while I'm sympathetic, I think we got to just plow ahead and do the best we can with this.
Thank you. So do we agree that if we hold these two items, then at the next time we discuss this, come to the meeting with, an option for creating a neighborhood parking district with the exact restrictions that we are recommending, which, that's almost like a technicality that we could change at the meeting based on public comment, right? We could change from a 2-hour limit, 8 to 6, to something else, right, at the meeting. But have the language written, decide what we want to do with the meters, decide what we want to do with Maple Street, and think a little bit more about how to post signage on Russell Road. Is there anything else that we need to think through at the next meeting besides writing all the language up? That's what I think. So I feel like we're 95% of the way there at this point. I mean, I sort of predicted that we were going to want to move forward with option 1, but that didn't happen. And I'm glad that we had this process. It seems like option 3, we would have to re-notify the whole neighborhood at the next meeting. We might have different people coming to that meeting with different opinions, right? But I think if we come to the next meeting with language that we could, modify and then take a final vote, this could be done in one meeting. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think we could.
Okay.
And I'm no fan of endless meetings. So.
Yeah. Right. And I know we've had already like at least 3 or 4 meetings over the years about Jefferson Street, for instance. Mitch, did you have a last comment? And you just need to unmute. Do you need, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I came in the meeting late, so I was not given, I wasn't advanced up. So my only request, I agree with everything that everyone said. My only request is that if we're coming back in November, hopefully then, that we have a standalone something for Russell Road. In other words, if we run into difficulty or we have issues with the more comprehensive thing, that we at least come up with something that is implementable, whether it's signage or whatever. And so, that street can benefit, particularly as the winter comes in and, there are obviously more challenges at that point. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Okay. I think this has been great. Are there any last comments before I think we're looking for a motion to hold?
So moved.
Okay, so there is, let me go back and try and find my agenda. I guess I can just go and see. So we have a motion to hold this one, TC 924, right? Any last comments before we vote? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Miss Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Okay, that's held 5-0.
And then we have a motion to hold TC 2424. Can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Devine,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Miss Schoenfelder.
Aye.
That's held 5-0.
All right, thank you. That's the end of our business for tonight. Thank you all again.
Thank you,
We'll see you all
everyone.
again in the next meeting, probably I would say November or December meeting is what I'm guessing. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yep.